What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I want to give an update on my favorite cannabis stock at the moment. Now it's no longer a penny stock in the form of HighTide, ticker symbol HITID, formerly known as HITIF. Now I want to discuss 5 points in today's video. The first of these giving an update on its current share price performance and even my own current position on Trading 212. We'll then give an update on all of the fundamentals and catalysts that we've mentioned in prior videos. Now this will be a very brief update on those. Then we'll go ahead and give 2 new catalyst updates in the form of HighTide being inducted into a cannabis ETF on the New York Stock Exchange. We'll also discuss briefly cannabis legislation going forward and how this will impact HighTide within the US. And finally, we'll give my plans going forward for this stock. And with all that being said, let's dive right on into today's video. Now, as it stands, HighTide is one of 33 holdings within my overall portfolio, which is currently worth €9,087, 7,970 of that is my own capital, and we have €1,200 or €1,112 profit or so, or just under 14%, and we also have €375 in free funds, which I discussed in yesterday's video, just so it gives us an overall portfolio of just under €9,500. Now, as I mentioned, HighTide is currently one of my positions out of 33, so now we'll have a look at how that's performing within the portfolio. Ironically enough, HighTide is one of my worst performing stocks out of the 33 so far. I think about 3 or 4 of the 33 are currently in the red, and HighTide is one of those. We can see here on the left we have about 35 shares or so here. We're down 13%. Now on the charts on screen here, we can see the current share price is sitting at about $7.77. Now this was a penny stock only up until recently, but we kind of discussed that share consolidation, the 15-to-1 reverse split in a few seconds. But my average price is a dot line here is $8.70 or so. On the 1 month chart, it is up 4% or 4.1%. 1 week chart is down 10.1%. Now again, that's due to the consolidation again and the kind of hype dying down and short sellers coming in after this 15-to-1 split. And in the 1 day chart, it's currently down about 1%. So here is the list of notes I compiled over the past few weeks or months on this stock. Again, it's nothing special, I know, but it's just kind of bullet points on some catalysts and their major fundamentals, which I believe will go in their right favor down the line. Now you can see here, for example, I have one highlighted in red, that they have a lot of high potential at current prices. Now that was when they were at a penny stock at 50 cents a share. That's why I kind of highlighted this in red, because I no longer think that is the case in terms of huge potential at the current prices. Now you need to hear me out here as well, because long term I believe they have a lot of potential, but at current prices I do feel, and we've seen on the charts only a few seconds ago, that there will be a lot of short sellers come in here for the next few weeks to kind of drag down the price as much as they can. So again, we discussed my plans going forward for this stock at the end of this video, and by no means am I selling any of those shares. I'll just give my plan going forward of when I'm going to buy more shares and at what price. And again, some of the other points that I mentioned in prior videos of why I'm going to be holding onto the stock, even though my position is down 13%. If anything, I'll be buying more to dollar cost average down, but again, we'll talk about that later on. So they have a very good diversification, which I mentioned in prior videos, so we won't go into detail on these points here. I'll be focusing more on the 2 highlighted in yellow at the bottom. But again, the filing for the NASDAQ is still underway. They're continually getting more mergers and acquisitions, which is very positive in my opinion. Again, it's very hard to find any negative news on HighTide, which I always say in all of my videos, but it is quite hard to actually find anything bad of what they're actually doing. Again, a lot of people weren't happy about the 15-to-1 reverse split, but besides that, there isn't really anything else that people are annoyed about, and that 15-to-1 reverse split was needed to get onto the NASDAQ. It was one of the criteria to get the share price up to a certain level before it could file for the NASDAQ. So again, it had to be done, and I feel if it gets onto the NASDAQ here, that's going to be of huge importance and a huge catalyst as well for the company going forward. Also, some older style news here as well, in the form of the Q1 earnings. Again, that's in the past, but they were very well. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Q2 performs and if they can keep up to the same consistency. Again, they're opening more stores. US presence is still ever ongoing by mergers and acquisitions, which I feel is extremely imperative. I mentioned before, when we really first started looking at this stock, is that one of the kind of weaknesses they had was that they needed to expand outside of Canada, so they need to get into Europe and the US more, particularly the US, and they're certainly doing that as well. Also, the share consolidation that I mentioned in the prior videos, the link in the description below, is the 15-to-1 split. So it was trading at about 50 cents a share, and now as we saw, it's at about $7.70 mark at the moment. Now your overall investment capital didn't change, it's just the amount of shares are worth more with less shares. So if you had 15 shares before at 50 cent, now you have the one share at $7.50 or so. That's kind of just a brief synopsis there. But again, a lot of people were annoyed about this. Now, I feel the reason people are annoyed, and again, I can see where they're coming from as well, but it had to be done in terms of that 50/1 split to actually get on the NASDAQ. Now, they're still filing for this, but this will definitely be a huge stepping stone here. But again, I can see where people are coming from in terms of having HighTide now like a sitting duck as such at values of $7 to $8 at the moment. So a lot of people, because it was a penny stock only up until recently, I believe a lot of people will start shorting this stock. And that's why I'm not going to be buying any more for the next week or two. Again, I'll discuss all this later on in the video, but I certainly will be buying more. I just feel it has a huge potential of dropping a small bit more in percentage wise. So I will hold off, and again, timing is imperative here to buy more of this stock. So again, we'll discuss that later on. Today, I just want to focus on the two main new catalysts at the moment. So the two new catalysts slash fundamentals that I wanted to add to today's list after doing some research was firstly, that this ETF or this stock has been added to a cannabis ETF on the New York Stock Exchange, ticker symbol THCX. So we'll have a look at a brief article here as well, and we'll have a look on Trading 212 to see can we find this ticker already. And second of all, I want to discuss cannabis legalization and legislations very briefly again on another document, which again could be a huge benefit for HighTide going forward. So we can see here that HighTide achieved further recognition with the addition of this cannabis ETF, ticker symbol THCX, again, as we previously announced. Now this kind of just shows the importance of this stock within the overall cannabis sector or industry, and again, it wouldn't be added to this ETF if they didn't believe it had potential. We can also see a very brief synopsis of this cannabis ETF as well, THCX, and it's a US listed ETF that provides investors with a liquid and diversified vehicle to gain access to the explosive growth of this cannabis industry. This tracks an Innovation Labs Cannabis Index, a modified market capitalized weighted index that is rebalanced on a monthly basis. We can also see on screen that there's a lot of holdings within this ETF. The top holding at the moment is Tilray, which has over 6% of the overall ETF. Now, HighTide isn't even near the top 10 or 20 holdings. We'll actually scroll down now to see where it is in this ETF. At time of recording, HighTide is currently sitting at about 28th or 29th position in this ETF and has about 1.86% of the overall holding. Now, to be 28th or 29th in this ETF is quite low in my opinion, considering that there isn't that many cannabis stocks in comparison to some other sectors. So again, it's because it's only after being introduced, I feel in the next few months, once it gets rebalanced again, I do feel that this percentage will only go up. You can also see some quotes here for an inclusion on this ETF from their CEO in the form of Raj, which in my opinion, which we've discussed in prior videos, is a very approachable guy. Now obviously I've never talked to him, but again, he's very approachable on Twitter to the average Joe Soap to go back on any questions or queries, which I feel as a prior penny stock is imperative. Now we can see his main quote here is that HighTide's inclusion on this ETF is a huge progress having been made in growing and expanding their business, particularly in the US. Now again, I've mentioned that earlier. And we can also see another quote today is that today's news provides us with additional tools to broaden our reach and profile among US investors. Again, huge point here, who are attracted to HighTide's consistent track record of delivering profitability and results for shareholders with our pending listing on the NASDAQ. Now, as obvious as this sounds, without actually being able to sell the product in such areas as the US, this company could sink just like most cannabis stocks. However, the US is always pushing forward for legislations to legalize cannabis, and we can even see here that the federals are definitely trying to get further and further here because a lot of bills have been passed in a lot of states. Now, within the US, it's a lot different to, let's say, here in Ireland, where if one bill is passed in Ireland, the whole of Ireland follows that same law. Whereas in the US, obviously, all of the different states kind of have their own mini laws as such. So it's a lot more kind of confusing here, and it takes a lot more effort to get the whole of a country such as the US on board. As you can imagine, getting this into the legislation won't be an easy job at all. There's a lot of mini subsectors here. For example, it's not just legalizing cannabis at all. There's also other factors such as removing criminal offences of cannabis possession on prior track records for people's lawsuits. So again, that just digs up a whole other kind of worms here. So that's why it's going to take so long to get this going through. But again, within the US, it's certainly going in the right direction, and it's not even stalling, it's actually continually moving forward, which I feel very promised towards, because once this finally gets legislated and legalized within the US, I really do feel not just HighTide, but all of the cannabis sectors will start to boom. Now, if I was asked again, I was about last week by one of my subscribers of the main catalyst for HighTide, and two of the main catalysts, in my opinion, would firstly be legislation within or legalization within the US, and the second of my main factors would be inclusion on the NASDAQ. Now, again, both are going fairly well in my opinion. They're both going in the right direction, and they have had no hiccups as such along the way in recent times. So, again, I'm really kind of optimistic about this stock going forward. Now, we can also see here a quick synopsis. The overall chart of legalization of cannabis within the US, the green squares here, or the green states, are the ones that legislation is already passed, and the red states are the ones that's still ongoing. So again, there's a lot more red than green on this map. But again, over the next few weeks and months, I really do feel that's going to be less and less red on this US map. Finally, in terms of my plans going forward for HighTide, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I definitely will not be selling a single one of those shares. If anything, I'll be buying more. However, saying that, just like the last few weeks, I won't be buying any for the next few weeks, even though my current position is down 13% at the moment. The main reason for this is because I do feel short sellers are going to try and manipulate the price still for the next few weeks, and possibly even a month or two. So I'm going to just hold off for now. If I'm wrong and the price goes up further, then well and good, I go back into the green and my 30% red cuts away. So that's a great opportunity there. But if I'm right, if it drops further, then I'm just getting it at a cheaper price anyway. So either way, it's a win-win situation in my opinion. And as a long-term investor, there's no race as such of getting into the stock, or any stocks for that matter. It's all about getting in at the right time to make the most of long-term growth. That's the end of today's video. I just want to give a very brief update on some of the catalysts and fundamentals for HighTide, ticker symbol HITID, going forward, and my plans also going forward for this stock. Thanks very much for watching today's video. I'll see you all in tomorrow's one.